Sparkle's been out for about a week now, and I learned one really important thing. No matter how many skill points you gain, it will never be enough. That aside, Sparkle's been pretty good, and I wanted to share as many gameplay tips as I could after playing her for a while. Some of these will be things you'll always want to be doing, and some are a bit min-maxy, but I think they're important if you want to squeeze every little bit of performance out of her. Before that, there are a couple build requirements you need to have for Sparkle. Not going to go into too much detail right now, but 134 speed should be your bare minimum target, which can be achieved with just speed boots, 2-piece hacker space, and any speed substat roll. Of course, you can make 160 be your endgame target, but it's not necessary. The other thing is, you need an energy regen rope, no other sources really matter, and this way we can get our guaranteed 3-turn ult. We'll show off Sparkle in some of her most popular teams, but realistically you can put her together with pretty much any crit scaling damage dealer and do well. Some tips you'll see will be character specific, but most of them will be fairly universal. We're going to start with our category of no speed investment damage dealers, using Jing Yuan as an example. The idea here is to take advantage of Sparkle's 50% action advance on her skill to immediately grant them an action and let them essentially piggyback off her speed. Assuming we're skill spamming with Sparkle, you can visualize the action order with her and the slower DPS basically acting at the same time, even though it's not actually happening. This is the most common way to use her, and it's pretty effective for a good reason. One of the biggest advantages is you can run an attack percent boost instead of speed on your damage dealer, or whichever main stat they scale with. You also don't need to worry about getting speed in your substats, which means more rolls can be allocated to damaging ones like crit and attack percent. Now, in theory that's nice, but we don't actually have that much control over how our relics roll, so sadly you might have some wasted speed substats. Also keep in mind that you won't be able to fulfill the speed requirements for Glamoth and Space Sealing Station, at least not without external buffs. Overall though, being able to use a preferred main stat is still well worth it. It's also super easy to pull off. All you really need to do is build a lot of speed on Sparkle and have no speed investment on your DPS. The most intricate part about playing Sparkle is really just managing her ult, but more specifically the buff it gives. There are two things that happen when you use her ult. First is you recover 4 skill points, at least at E0, and the second effect, a buff called Cypher, increases the damage boost from her talent for 2 turns. Now, you can see here that if you cast her ult on an ally's turn, Cypher won't actually tick down at the end of their current turn, which basically means the increased damage bonus can be active for 3 turns instead of 2. What you'll want to do to make the most of this is try to cast her ult whenever it's your DPS's turn. Because we're always guaranteed to get her ult within 3 actions, this means that after casting her ult the first time, you can maintain 100% uptime on Cypher for the rest of the battle on your DPS if you use it on their turn. Do note though that this only applies for slow damage dealers. If they're faster than Sparkle or have another way to gain an action, Cypher will of course tick down faster than Sparkle can maintain it. There is more to this though. What if Sparkle took several hits and has enough energy to ult and it's her turn? In this case, instead of using her skill and ulting on the DPS's turn, you actually want to ult first. But wait, didn't I just tell you to wait for the DPS's turn before ulting? Thing is, you can still guarantee 100% uptime this way. You ult, you use your skill on Sparkle to gain energy, the DPS takes action with the buff. Next time you skill on Sparkle, you gain energy, the DPS takes action with the buff, and it expires after. By the third time you use your skill on Sparkle, you will guaranteed have your ult again. Now you can just wait to ult on the DPS's turn, and it'll last for 3 turns instead of 2. The main advantage with doing this is you get to ult 1 turn earlier on Sparkle, which won't affect the Cypher uptime on the DPS, because either way it's not going to expire, but most importantly, you get those 4 skill points earlier. So the Sparkle playbook is super simple, and we can just follow a flowchart. Whenever she's got her ult available, first we want to see if it's her turn. If it is, then we ult, then skill. If it's not her turn, then we check if it's our DPS's turn. If it is, then we ult. If not, we hold it until the DPS's turn, and then we ult. You might be aware of a buff extension tech where if you ult after skilling on Qingque and Blade, the buff duration will not count down on that turn. For example, after using Qingque's skill, you can use Bronya's ult, which will last 3 turns instead of 2. Unfortunately for Sparkle, there's no additional duration here if you ult after using a skill on Qingque, if that's what you were wondering. Using it on their turn will already make it last 3 turns, and you can't get 4 unless you get E1. Another consideration to make is if you're running sub DPSs that have damaging ults like Pella or Silverwolf, you might want to hold those ults until after Sparkle casts hers. This way, they can benefit from Cypher's increased damage bonus, and when you're pushing for more cycles, anything that you can do to get more damage will help. Sparkle also isn't just restricted to hyper carries, and timing her ult to maximize uptime in a dual DPS comp becomes even more important. Now, when you're using Sparkle, you might notice that you've got an abundance of skill points, which is kind of what she's designed to do. So far, she's the only skill point positive, skill spamming support, which means you can actually afford to use more skill points on your supports and be less frugal with them. And I'm not saying you can just straight up skill spam, but timing the extra skill uses can easily improve your survivability as well as clear time. You can easily keep yourself topped up by refreshing your shields or heals, or even cleansing and avoiding CC by, for example, refreshing Fu Xuan's skill earlier than you need to. But the most important reason to use your skills more if you can afford to is that you get more energy for your ults. There are so many different ways to use this to your advantage, but we'll take Tingyun as an example. If you don't need to use her skill, but it gives you enough energy to ult and using a basic wouldn't, it's worth using the skill, meaning you can maintain more uptime on her ult's damage buff, but also refilling your main damage healer's energy more frequently. Knowing when to do this does take a bit of practice and gauging your own energy bar, since every fight you'll have different characters being targeted for attacks, so energy regen isn't 100% predictable. But basically, as a byproduct of Sparkle's existence, you'll have better uptime on buffs for your team and debuffs on enemies, all while making it a lot easier to keep the team healthy. Even when you're running faster damage dealers, so -1 -1 speed Sparkle relative to your DPS, all the same rules still apply. It's just a bit harder to maintain perfect uptime on Cypher, and it's not that big of a deal. You're still aiming to skill every turn on Sparkle, but just know that you will be consuming more skill points because the DPS will be taking more actions. For Seele specifically, she'll actually be slower on just the first turn, but after she gets her skill speed boost of 25% or 28.75 speed, she will go ahead of Sparkle if you have Sparkle on less speed than that. So just as an example, let's say my Seele is E0 with 121 speed. As long as I have my Sparkle at 149 speed or lower, Seele will overtake her after her first skill use. And it'll be in sync as long as I manage to skill at least once every 2 actions on Seele. Last thing I will say is if Seele gets her ult when it's not her turn, whether it's being hit or by something else, and Seele's next action starts before Sparkle's but you still have her skill's crit damage buff, don't be afraid of just using it there because it's going to expire at the start of Seele's turn. We don't want her to ult without the buff, and as soon as Seele's turn starts, she loses out on it. We have a good example here with Sparkle's crit damage buff still on Seele, and she got hit so she has her ult ready. We know it'll expire by the time Seele's turn starts, so we want to use her ult right before that happens, otherwise she's going to miss out on Sparkle's crit damage bonus. You might not want to ult if there are only weak or low health enemies left, but it's something to consider, especially if you want to maximize your damage. We also don't want to hold our ult until after Sparkle buffs us either, because look how much energy we'd lose if we did that. Again, a lot of these things are not necessary by any means, but if you really want to stretch Sparkle's value as a support as far as you can, these are some of the ways you can do that. This is pretty much all I've got, and I know there are many more things that I didn't cover, so feel free to share anything you think is important in the comments. Still got over 2 weeks left on the Sparkle banner, so good luck if you are pulling. But with that, thank you for watching.